Hello, welcome to The Honest Wargamer. I'm your host, Rob. This is going to be a tier list review for the Stormcast Eternals. This is a follow-on video to, obviously, the review of the Battle Tome. But now we have all of the points for Stormcast Eternals, we can start to kind of break them down and look at units that you may want to pick up and which units are going to be most effective for you to want to play, and also maybe if you want to play them in tournaments. I want to be really clear. This is obviously a competitively focused video where the units and their usefulness, I'll just take a moment to explain, we use this system where units are the most effective, fine, ineffective, and least effective. Sometimes this is without points being super important, and sometimes units are effective because of points, and when I do review them I will try obviously to explain it. This also probably, if you can look at the clock now, isn't going to be a short video because of this absolute wall, right? This wall of stuff that we have to go through. It's a bananas amount of stuff. Okay, so it's going to take quite a while. So I hope you enjoy this video. Please do leave comments on what your thoughts are on the different types of units down below. Go back and watch the Stormcast review also if you want to, and let me know if that any other videos you'd like me to make about armies, and do that all in the comments. And if you have liked the content that I make, then the best way to support what I do is join me on Patreon or join me on Twitch, either of them, which would be great. Right, let's dive straight in. It's going to be fun. The first unit we're going to look at is the Humble Aetherwing, because it's an A. They are cheap. If we take a moment to look at Age of Index, which is a website that we use to look at this stuff, you can see that a unit of 3 models move 14 inches, and they're not good in a fight, and they aren't great at holding objectives, but being only 80 points and moving 14 inches, which with a run can be up to 20, I'm going to put them into effective. There's 2 ways to win. Well, there's a couple of ways to win Age of Sigmar, but the most effective way to win Age of Sigmar, obviously, is to score as many points as possible. There's obviously that, and then denying your opponent scoring points by killing their stuff. There's a bunch of stuff. But this is an effective unit for scoring points. Your army is going to be expensive when you're in a Stormcast, but it's effective, scores your points, therefore, that's what they're there for. Our next 2 units are the same unit, but with different weapon loadouts. You've got Annihilators with Grand Hammers and Annihilators with a Meteoric Shield. Well, with shields, sorry. Not Meteoric Shields, or whichever. Okay, so looking at those, you can see the Annihilators with shields have a 2-up save, and they're pretty cheap at 160 points. So a reinforced unit is going to be 320 points for 18 health on a 2-up save. Ward saves a little bit more difficult to come by. Obviously, there are ways to get them. So that's pretty good. I don't know if you necessarily need something that's just going to stand there. The output is fine if you look at it. They do like 6 damage against a 2-up save. This is a reinforced unit. Whereas the Grand Hammer Annihilators are obviously a big punchy block. 6 models will do 19 attacks, and then without +1 to hit and +1 to wound, just a reinforced unit of 6, it's going to do 16 damage against a 2-up save, which is really effective. Very, very effective. They're 210 points, though. So that reinforced unit is going to run you 420 points. If that unit dies, you can bring 3 back. As a hammer unit, as an actual hammer unit, and I know they've got hammers. All right. Opportunity right now to say half the unit actually have hammers, Rob. All right. I personally think that if you take the concept of hammer and anvil, which is an anvil holds the line and a hammer destroys stuff, they kind of work. These obviously work together, but I think the Stormcast roster needs the hammer element more than it needs the holding the line element. And the reason that I say that is because normally you're not very wounds dense in your army. You don't have a lot of wounds. You have a good armor save, right? And therefore you need to be able to reduce your opponent's output versus being able to survive their output, right? In my opinion. Okay, so I think that you're going to put the Grand Hammer Annihilators in effective, maybe even in most effective. The delivery system's a little bit difficult. We should probably talk about that. You have the new Portaloo, which we should probably do next. That Portaloo for doing teleporting. You do have other ways. Other than that, they're pretty slow. So the delivery system's a little bit more difficult. I think maybe they're between effective and most effective. I'm going to put them in effective. I'm going to bump them both up a tier. I think they're both really good, but I'm going to put effective and most effective. And the reason, now I normally wouldn't put them in those categories, but with Stormcast, you can put stuff into Deep Strike. So maybe it should be like this. I'm going to put this like this, right? They do their job which is important. I think that's where I'll put them. You are able to teleport stuff. You are able to grab stuff. So you don't need to put them on the board. Their movement isn't an issue because of the amount of teleporting you have. You need something that can hammer stuff, and that's what they're great at. The other guys are good for holding the line, but I don't know if you really need to hold the line in Stormcast. I think you need to be aggro because you don't have enough of a wound pool to be aggro. You don't have enough of a wound pool to be defensive, sorry. Our next unit is a named character, Astreia Solbright. 220 points for a 1-cast wizard that gives +1 to wound, and +1 to wound to Sacrosanct units, and +2 to charge to Sacrosanct Cavalry, as well as being a wizard that can do some mortal wounds. It's atrocious in combat with 4 attacks, 3/3, rend 1 damage 2, before people on Facebook start clipping and shipping. That is a bad profile for a frontline combat character, and so isn't effective there either. 8 health on a 3-up save. I can't really see a justification for Astreia Solbright unless you were planning on running some of the Sacrosanct units, and seeing as Sacrosanct units won't be legal in 6 months, I find it very difficult to advocate either picking them up or if you currently have them, then that's fine. She is a wizard though, so unfortunately I am gonna put her in fine because a wizard is good. Like an 8 health 3-up save wizard is good. I'm going to put it in ineffective because there are better wizards. There are better wizards, but it is a wizard. That's why I'm going to put it, because it's defensive. And if you were running Sacrosanct Cavalry, then it would be more effective. But I think you're unlikely. When we get up here, the Sacrosanct Cavalry are not going to be in the most effective sort of section. Therefore, she isn't going to benefit your good units, therefore isn't going to be effective. So I'm going to put it there. Our next unit is Aventis Firestrike. Aventis Firestrike is a 12 health, 3-up save, 2-cast wizard, which is pretty unique in Stormcast because your wizard levels are, for some reason, pretty low. Also control 5, so I'm going to say this about most monsters. The ability to just pop around on objectives and add 5 to control score is really excellent. But as a wizard and not as a combat unit, because the combat output, as you can see from the math here, is atrocious, especially for a monster. It's in the support role, and as a 2-cast wizard, it's pretty good. You got the ability to do at least 2 manifestations or do 2 of your spells. But the spells that you have in Stormcast Eternals aren't necessarily very effective for the economies of scale that you would see, like for instance when we talked about Skaven, where with Skaven you can have a priest that gives a unit fight twice. That's actually really strong. This, you don't have anything that does anything anywhere near as effective. So your wizardly levels aren't anywhere near as impactful as necessarily they are in other armies. Also, they've got their own special spell, which just does a mortal damage, which isn't a big deal. The ability to heal 3, and then a pretty tragic ability where in combat, you're able to add +1 to hit to other units that are nearby, which you can just do with a command point. Sure, it saves you a command point to use in other situations, but I don't think that this is a model that is going to support your army, and at 310 points isn't also going to do damage. The only real saving grace for this is moves 14 has got control value 5, so it could potentially pop onto objectives. So I'm going to put it as ineffective. It can't be the least effective because it is a 2-cast wizard, which is pretty rare. But I'm going to put it as ineffective, and that's where it's going to stay. Right, the next unit we're going to look at are Castigators. Castigators, again, are one of the units that are going to move into Legends, and they're a shooting unit. A unit of 3 models with only 2 health each on a 3-up save. And they're pretty good. Like, genuinely are pretty good. Maybe if you played them in other books, you would take them. But, and I think maybe we're going to pivot now how we're going to do this review. There are other units in this book that are just so that much better, then these aren't as effective inside its own book in the eternal kind of balance. I'm going to put them as fine, because they are fine. They can do some okay damage, not loads of damage. In fact, actually, I'm going to put them as they're fine. They're fine. That's what they do. They're a damage-dealing unit, but they're a better damage-dealing units. Next unit we are going to look at is not really a unit, but it is the terrain piece. It's the Portaloo. And the Portaloo you have to take. It gives you a free teleport. It's the most effective. It's quite big. Does give your opponent's ability to have a charge target, so be careful where you deploy it, but obviously you're going to take it because you need it, and then is very good. Most effective, that's where it sits. All right, so we are going to, just before we go any further, we're going to do long strikes, okay? And we're going to put these up here. Now, I did make a video, which is be on the Honest Wargamer channel, not on the Honest Wargamer Streams channel, so if you want to go back and watch that, where I talked about the difference between melee and shooting, and the inability for when you do shoot with a unit, your opponent doesn't strike back. When I charge into a unit, I fight it. Unless I kill it, that unit also has the ability to do damage back to me. So it's an attrition-based interaction, whereas shooting is not an attrition-based interaction. To make shooting even stronger in Age of Sigmar 4, obviously they gave us the ability to shoot in the opponent's turn. Therefore, we are in a shooting meta because shooting units now have become twice as effective, and still, because you aren't able to interact with them, i.e. like hit them back, they are doing damage without you losing any resources. Therefore, they're super impactful. So really, what most lists and most armies are doing is they're finding their best shooting unit and they're installing it into their army list because you get the ability to strike twice effectively. And the best shooting unit in this book is the Longstrikes, Vanguard-Raptors with Longstrike Crossbows. They do a significant amount of damage at a significant range. They also have an ability called a teleport. They're able to ignore Guarded Hero, which is an ability as well. And with a good range, they're able to just keep shooting. So all of those reasons are why missile units are very good. And then in this book, this is the best or the better missile unit, and so is very effective. In fact, if we were to do this review across all of the books, the best shooting unit in each book would always go into the most effective section because of everything I just said previously. So Longstrikes, and I'm sure you don't, if you're a Stormcast fan already, you don't need me to explain that. If you are someone new, hopefully that's helpful. But that's why Longstrikes will be there. Our next unit, which is also going to go into the most effective tier, is going to be Vigilors. Okay, so let's talk about why they're most effective. So a unit of 5 Vigilors over, let's say, Castigators. Castigators have got 6 health on a 3-up save, whereas Vigilors have got 5 models with 2 health each, so it's going to be 10 health on a 3-up save. They're a missile unit, I should point out as well. But they also do something which is brilliant, where they give army-wide +1 to hit from their shooting attack. So if we just take a moment to look at their ability, which is here, it's called Navigators of the Storm. If an enemy unit had any damage points allocated to it this turn by this unit's shooting attacks, add 1 to hit rolls for attacks made by friendly Stormcast Eternal units that target that unit for the rest of the turn. This ability works by split firing. So if I do multiple damage to multiple units from this one unit, they're all going to get, my entire army is going to get +1 to hit against that unit in the rest of the shooting phase and also in the combat phase. So being able to give this unit +1 to hit and making it actually hit units means basically my army gets army-wide +1 to hit in shooting and fighting. So make sure I shoot with these first, which is obviously excellent. So they are a force multiplier in a significant way. They're only 130 points. Cool. Their bow, which gives the +1 to hit, is 18 inches, and you get 2 shots each. So a unit of 5 is going to be doing 11 shots. 3s and 3s, rend 1, damage 1, which is excellent. They're survivable enough, I guess. They're cheap enough, as has been pointed out in the chat, that you could drop 2 units of 5 to do table quarters and board edges and terrain. I know you can't do board edges when you land, but they can sit at the flanks of an enemy army, giving your army +1 to hit, which is obviously really solid. And yeah, they just are super effective as a force multiplier and themselves, and they're also cheap. So all around brilliant. And every other unit will struggle in this category to even remotely touch them. They've also got 2 attacks in close combat, 3s and 3s. So every other unit is going to struggle to touch them because they do pretty much the profile that most of the Stormcast units do. But they also, are a big force multiplier. Okay, our next unit is the being that's carrying Warhammer. When you go into a Warhammer store, the Warhammer on the front, the Celestant-Prime, is carrying that Warhammer, Gal Maraz, the biggest of all hammers. It's not the biggest. And his rule sets, while okay, he's a damage dealer. Let's talk about his unit role. His unit role is as a damage dealer. He does nothing in the force multiplication role for your army. And as a damage dealer, you can see here, can do up to 9 damage against a 2-up save. And it's got the opportunity to maybe generate more attacks. Survivability, 10 health, 3-up save, 5-up ward is okay, especially for the pretty low cost of 320. But ultimately, because he does nothing else apart from be a damage dealer, the real question, and also doesn't have any utility for movement, for instance, not a 3d6 charge, which I think should have been something that was on his war scroll. Doesn't have any special power through abilities, etc. Is a good melee frontline fighter. But the question I'm asking myself is, can I find more damage in this army, or can I find something that also does damage and also brings force multiplication? Good example would be like Krondys. Like, I could, for a lot more points, surely, add, put these points into Krondys, who also brings me a wizard, more survivability, etc., etc. So that's the kind of question I'm asking. Me and the chat have had a convo about it, and I personally think Fine is a good place to put him. He's a good damage dealer. He's not the best damage dealer, and therefore isn't as effective as other damage dealers, which is the point of the chart. The next unit is the Celestar Ballistar, which actually, pre the FAQ or the Battle Scroll update, there was actually a pretty stonky build for the Ballista. It's a shooting unit. It's not very effective. I'm just going to put it there. Our next unit is another damage-dealing unit. This is Decimators, a unit of 5 models with 3 health each. So you do reinforce this unit because normally when you have damage-dealing units, you want them to be as damagey as possible. So you reinforce the unit, and then you give them things like +1 to hit, or you do a spell like Bless Weapons to be able to, or Prayer, whichever one it is, to be able to make them more effective, because you obviously are getting more effect over more models and more units, right? So that's what the Decimator, that's what we're talking about when you reinforce them. And these guys can do some pretty solid damage against with +1 damage against units with 10 or more models. There's not necessarily lots of units in Age of Sigmar 4 that at the top end with 10 or more models. Like normally you're seeing things like 10 Dawn Riders or 10 like Ossiarch Bone Reaper Cavalry, the Death Riders. It's kind of where the upper end of where your 10s are. You don't tend to have many more than that, which is pretty fun. They're also pretty expensive, 240 for 5. So a big reinforced unit would be 480 points, which is a lot of points. And you can probably get maybe not as an effective combat unit, but some pretty good ones. But I'm going to put them as fine, because you can legit do some damage with these guys. Movement is an issue, like we're seeing with the guys above. And they don't have as much output as the Annihilators with Grand Hammers. So they're fine. Next up, I'm picking out a fun one. That's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to pick out Neave Blacktalon. Right, so Neave Blacktalon, I'd love to put into most effective. I'd absolutely adore that. But she doesn't actually provide a lot of force multiplication to your army. What does Neave do? She's an assassin unit that is able to work really well with her unit that she brings along with. And you actually get quite a few individual units. So when you bring Neave, you also get the Blacktalons, you also get Lori, which is a wizard. So for 320 points, that's incredible, because you're now getting 3 individual units, which is good for holding objectives, doing battle tactics, and a bunch of stuff like that. But Neave herself is a great combat character, especially into heroes. And because the way you build regiments in Age of Sigmar 4, obviously every regiment is led by a hero. So generally there's quite a few heroes on the board to go murder. And many of the units, many of those heroes have their special rules locked into them, like, Lord of Change or Kairos, as an example. Lord of Change bringing models back from the dead. But when she gets into those combats, she absolutely slams. And I would argue that she's probably in that most effective tier for that role. But I'm definitely going to put her in effective, because there's a lot of utility for the points cost that you get. Like I say, it's 3 different units. One of those models has got like an 18-inch shooting attack. You have a level 1 wizard. You have the ability to make it so her and all of her models can only be hit by shooting attacks on 6s, which is really solid. Like, it's an incredible package. If you're a Stormcast player, it's the most fun unit in this book, 100%. It's the most fun unit in this book. But I also think it's a very effective unit. And I'm very tempted to put this up into most effective. But I'm not going to, because I think that doesn't make sense with all of my other justifications. But it's very good. Right, the next unit we're going to talk about is Lord Commander Bastian Carthalos. I think he's sold out everywhere. So Lord Commander Bastian Carthalos, where are we going to put this guy? We're going to put him up into most effective. Let's talk about why we're going to put him into most effective. He's not necessarily exactly the unit you're going to take in every build. He's not like an auto-include, like Longstrikes definitely are, and Vigilors probably are, but Bastian probably isn't an auto-include in every list, but he definitely is an incredibly good pick for a meta type of build or a specific type of build. And that's because of this ability that it has down here called the Castellan of Azir. Pick up to 3 friendly Stormcast Eternal infantry units to be the targets. Each target unit can use the normal move ability as if it were your movement phase. So 3 friendly Stormcast Eternal infantry units. So that's the important part. We already need to deal with infantry units, but it's not like locked to different chambers. Doesn't need to be Ruination Chamber or anything like that. Why is that such an effective ability? Loads of people you'll see online will talk about needing your armies to be 1 drop or 2 drops or whatever it be with the choice to go first. The reason that they talk about this is because what they want to do is they want to establish the tempo of how the game will work. For instance, they might want to go first because they want to flood all of the objectives or do an easy battle tactic. Or because they want to give the turn away, they want to be a low drop so they can give the turn away, so their opponent has to move into unpack, as my friend Owen always says, unpack their army from their deployment to be able to start doing battle tactics, grabbing objectives, as an example. Then you can countercharge or hit them or something like that, okay? That's how the game, the chess, the positioning of the game works. What Bastion does is he immediately makes 3 of your units already engage at the start. So if your opponent doesn't get the choice, or if you get the choice, right, you now have even more move. If you get the choice, you have even more movement on your units if you want them. Or if your opponent gets the choice, then they are in a much more difficult position of working out what they would normally do with their positioned units as they unpack. In addition, one of the things that you need to be aware of is when you do move on to those objectives during the deployment, you're going to be grabbing objectives. So now your opponent maybe needs to overcommit. Maybe they only had a really small unit that they were going to go and grab an objective with. Now they need to get a bigger unit because you've moved an infantry block up the board, maybe denying tactics or a bunch of other stuff. As well as that, a good combat fighter, that heals, and it's just super powerful. And some of your better units in this book are also infantry units, which is fun. So Bastion is absolutely solid, and it's solid in a way that doesn't make sense until you put it on the tabletop, and then you really start to understand how you score points, how tempo of games work, and how you're able to do stuff. If nothing else, it's able to push you out a screen. Anyway, loads of units are infantry. Longstrikes are infantry, as an example. Prosecutors are infantry. There's lots of infantry units in this that are badass, and being able to move early. Also, last point, when you're deploying, you already know who gets the choice to go first. And so this is like a counter option if you don't have the choice, or if you do have the choice. It's really solid. Anyway, he's 11 out of 10. Our next unit is the Knight-Heraldor. The Knight-Heraldor. Knight-Heraldor I'm going to put into ineffective for a couple of reasons. Knight-Heraldor has the ability, terrible in combat, 3 attacks, rend 1 damage 2. Anyway, it's got a general Stormcast stat line, 110 points. What he is able to do is he's able to add +3 to the rally command for specifically warrior chamber units. Are you going to be taking lots of warrior chamber units? Probably not. But as an example, that's not a bad addition if you can get a lot of healing into your pretty elite army. So he's not going to go into least effective because he does have some force multiplication for 110 points. Are you always going to be reusing the rally command? No. It's probably never going to come up. Therefore, just put it in the bin. But it's ineffective, but it's still there. Our next unit is Praetors. This is a unit of 3 models with a pretty good armor save. But they are going to go into most effective. I know you're asking yourself, what the hell, Rob? Unit of 3 models. They're a melee unit. That's this here, I guess, 10 attacks in total from a unit of 3. They have a 3-up save. But the reason that they're most effective and the reason that you take them is because of Soulforged Guardians, where while this unit is soul bonded, you pick a unit to be soul bonded with it, and this unit and that unit gain a 5-up ward save. Why is this super important? Well, some of your better units in the game are massive models that you want to give a ward save to. And so you're paying pretty cheap, 150 points, effectively to give a ward save to some of the strongest units, while also giving this unit a ward save as well. So that's why the Praetors are in there. And when we talk about the big dragons like Karazai and Krondys, they getting a ward save is actually super effective. So it's a very good ability, and it makes your effective units more effective. Therefore, it's in the most effective section. All right, next unit is going to be Prosecutors, and I've been a stan since day one for the 4th edition Prosecutors. Prosecutors are, I'm going to put in the most effective category because of stacking abilities versus them just being a pure output unit, which they are, right? So they're comparable in many ways when what you want to do is reinforce units to get the most damage as possible. Vanguard is a good example with that. And then the Celestant-Prime we've put down as fine. And then when you reinforce unit of Prosecutors, why are they up in the most effective section? The reason is a couple of reasons, but when you have a Stormcast Eternals army, you have the ability to deep strike and also teleport. You have two like coinciding abilities to be able to remove units from the board and deep strike them. The big problem that you have, and the reason that Grandhammer Annihilators are ineffective and not in most effective, is because then normally you have to bang a 9-inch charge from deep strike. That's a real problem. But for prosecutors, that isn't a problem because they have the Heralds of Righteousness that lets them charge on 3d6. This is also really good in conjunction with the fact that it gets +1 damage on the charge. So they have a pretty good stat line for the pretty cheap cost of 140 points. If you wanted to build them as a unit that's going to deep strike, 280 points for 6 models that are going to do something like 8 damage against a 3-up save in combat is pretty okay. And then in addition, they also have a shooting attack. So they're one of those hybrid units, a bit like Vigilors. They kick out more damage than you necessarily think. This conversation is also going to come up when we talk about Paladors in a minute. Those hybrid units, that's 8 damage not on the charge. Oh, sorry, probably more like 16 damage on the charge against a 3-up save, which is pretty impressive, okay? Very, very good. And the fact that you can put them into deep strike is really good. That's your ability for Stormcast, so why not? And that's the difference between the prosecutors and the Celestant-Prime, in that they are more effective in their role because of the delivery system that they bring on their War Scroll. In addition, they move fast, which is good. But the reason prosecutors are also incredible is because you can also split them out. So instead of having a big unit of 6, you have 2 units of 3, and those can do a bunch of battle tactics, can be really mobile on flanks. They are fighty enough as a unit of 3 to potentially hit some of those other smaller skirmishing units that are, being annoying on the board edges or doing something else, right? So prosecutors, excellent. I think they're very effective at their points cost right now. Maybe if they got more expensive, I maybe would push them down into effective. But that 3d6 charge is what really pumps up their viability. And if the Celestant-Prime had a 3d6 charge, it maybe would even be most effective. Right, really would. So that's why they're up there. Our next unit is Tornus the Redeemed, one of our new releases in Age of Sigmar 4. So Tornus is going to go in this ineffective tier. Let me justify as to why. It's also arguable that maybe he would even go in least effective. We'll stick him in ineffective. What does Tornus do? Well, Tornus is only an 8 health 3-up save model for 220 points. That is not very survivable. He has almost no output to really talk about in combat. Ren 2 is fine, but isn't what you would call a combat character, especially for 220 points. Can I get much more hitty units for 220 points? Yes. So what does he do? Not a priest, not a wizard. Instead, he has the ability to add +3 to a rally that I do. So I roll a rally, which is roll 6 dice, any 4-ups. I can heal a unit, or if I roll enough that I equal the wounds characteristic of a unit or health characteristic of a unit, I can bring a model back. So if I rolled, the unit was 3 health and I rolled 3 4-ups, then I could bring a model back. Tornus adds +3 to that. So I could bring 2 3 wound models back, which is pretty nice. But for 220 points, I'm putting 220 points in my army to say to myself, okay, in some situations, I'm going to need to do a rally because I'm losing models, and I'm going to get maybe 1 extra model back. It's not super impressive, to be honest, especially when his output is lacking. He has an ability that he does in combat, which on a 3-up, you can make units near him -1 to hit, which is not a strong enough ability because it's not an auto ability. It's just a chance to do it. So the chance I might be doing rally, the chance that I might make units -1 to hit, for 220 points to do no combat makes it ineffective. But I do like stacking rally abilities. I think there is something there, especially in Elite Force, so I'm not putting it least effective. Okay, the other version of Tornus is the unnamed Knight-Azyros. Okay, so the Knight-Azyros has got some pretty cool rules. 180 points for the Knight-Azyros. Not very survivable. 6 health with a 3-up save. So it's going to die super fast. It's going to die super fast. Moves 12 inches, but doesn't have a 3d6 charge. Why none of the winged things like the Azyros and Tornus don't have a 3d6 charge with the wings, but prosecutors and Ynastra do, I don't know. He's got that same ability for -1 to hit that Tornus has, which is garbage. But the reason that you would take the Knight-Azyros for 180 points is at the end of any turn, you pick a prosecute unit wholly within 12 inches, and then on a 3-up, pick one of the following effects, which is you can make a full retreat, don't take mortals, or you can make a full move, depending if you're in combat or not. I really want that ability to be really fun, and I do like the idea of doing a retreat and then doing a rally and then having Tornus nearby and then adding 3 to that rally to really buff that unit up. So the concept that I throw 6 prosecutors in and then I bring them back, rally them up, even if it's my opponent's turn, and then either countercharge or charge in is a pretty fun idea as a package. But I'm spending so many points on making that package work, and most of it's doing nothing, which is Tornus and the Knight-Azyros, and I just don't think it really works or makes much sense anyway. When for the price of that, I could just get 6 more prosecutors, which seems to make a lot more sense. Anyway, I think the ability, and then also all of that cool shit that I just said, all that fun, engaging stuff is based on being holier than 12 inches and rolling a 3-up. I really feel that ability should just auto happen. So unfortunately, it's going to go in ineffective. Our next unit is Ynastra, the Celestial Spear. Ynastra is immediately going into most effective. You weren't expecting that, were you? Incredible stuff, Ynastra. So she's got 8 health, 3-up save, and an inbuilt 5-up ward save. So why, Rob, does she get much higher than the good old Celestant-Prime? Well, number one, she has that 3d6 charge. So all the things that I've talked about previously. She's also, she's the same points cost, but she absolutely slams into monsters with an incredible amount of damage, with an 8 damage shot with Thangavar at range. And then she does 6 damage with 2 attacks with Thangavar in combat, which is pretty good. Is she like crazy effective as a force multiplier? No. But the 3d6 charge and the small base makes her much, much more effective than the Celestant-Prime, even though the Celestant-Prime averages his damage out against different types of units. But let's also talk about the meta that she's being deployed into. She's being deployed into Age of Sigmar 4, where, as I've said before, many of the special rules are based around monsters, and those monsters are leaders who are running factions. Ushuran, as an example, Be'lakor, and she's got great rend, and she's absolutely cool. So 3d6 charge, doubles damage against monsters, and also lets Stormcast Eternal units ignore control value stuff. Not that that's actually an issue in the game, but a 60 mil base that can 3d6 charge and slam people, 11 out of 10. She's in most effective. All right, our next 2 units are Iridan the Witness, and then we're going to also take the time to talk about the Lord-Vigilant on Morgryph. The Iridan the Witness is 330 points, and so is a priest. And is also a priest, which is pretty good. 12 health with a 3-up save and a control score of 5 is like a good kind of base. You're like, okay, cool. That's a good framework for a delivery vehicle for something else. The delivery vehicle, though, is pretty weak sauce, especially as a frontline combat character, if that's what you're doing, for 320 points. 320 points? 330 points. So you're asking yourself, okay, well, a level 1 priest, Rob, that's 100, 230 points. What sort of output do you get? You can see from the damage calculator here, it's really, really not very good. But maybe can be used to travel around the flanks and murder stuff, I guess. And in addition to that, at the end of any turn, this unit is also going to be able to maybe spike a roll and kill a large wound model, because you auto wound a model, auto kill a model with Dark Flight. And it's also a priest, as we said, and has got the ability to potentially heal D3 to units within range, wholly within 18 inches when you have Ruination Chamber. A Ruination Chamber units within 18, when they fight, they can heal D3. The problem is most of the Ruination Chamber units aren't big multi-wound models. They're like 3 wounds or 2 wounds. The Reclusians are 3. So being able to heal 3 doesn't return a lot of models. It just heals 3, which means you need a Reclusian to be on 1 or 2 health. And I mean, do you really care about healing 1 or 2 to Reclusian? Not really that bothered. In my opinion, maybe if you're running MSU of the Ruination units, then that would work, because multiple chances to spike a bit of a heal. That still feels like a lot of 330 points to maybe make that happen, and I need the prayer to work. But the biggest problem with stacking Ruination units, has been pointed out in the chat, is Ruination Chamber units all have this ability where you can ignore a resistance roll you can make on a 4+, but that is only once per army. So the more Ruination Chamber units you do have the opportunity to do it in more different places on the board, but once you've done it once, the other units aren't going to have their special, quote unquote special ability. So I think Iridan the Witness specifically, when I can find him on this little chart here, Iridan the Witness, is going to go into ineffective. I think I'm going to argue this is in least effective, because all of the reasons that you would take it gets worse as you start to really understand how you would construct an army. At least the prosecutor thing I can see working up here with these two, but that's worse. So I'm putting it down in least effective because it's Garbo. And then if we talk about the Lord-Vigilant on Morgryph, which is where it gets really bad, for 280 points, what you've got is a combat character. That's what we're getting, 12 health, 3-up save. But his combat profile is absolutely garbage. Very, very bad. But he does have this once per turn for the army in your hero phase ability. Pick a friendly non-hero Ruination Chamber unit for the rest of the turn. Whilst unit is holding than 12 inches, add 5 to the control score. That's just useless when really what you wanted to be doing is killing stuff or surviving stuff. So that just doesn't work either. And then he has this terrible Vice-like grip ability, but is double stipulated as being a enemy hero, non-monster hero. When, as I've just said earlier, the reason that we're seeing, our Bay Ynastra is at the top of the board is because we know there are loads of monsters in the game. Those monsters have all those abilities baked into them. So this guy is literally fighting the units that don't exist and no one wants to fight. Just terrible. So that's also going to go into least effective. And I would like to point out now, if you are one of the new people listening to me, or if you're just a Stormcast stan, I'm as gutted as you that these wicked new models suck, right? And in that situation, I want to be really clear. I think these look so good, and I'd love to run them. I like the story behind them as well, and they're just not very effective. Yeah, so just going to pop this up into also least effective. Next unit we're going to look at is the Lord-Terminos. Lord-Terminos is 150 points for a frontline melee fighter with a pretty good profile. 4 attacks, damage 3 with crit mortals. Not super great, but fine. 3s and 2s, Ren 2. Now, it's got is a Ruination Chamber unit, isn't a priest, isn't a wizard. It's just a frontline fighter. But the reason maybe you would take a Lord-Terminos is because of the double combination or the stacking combination that you get in this army. What you're able to have is you're able to use the ability Earn an Honorable Death, which is like many other melee heroes have in Age of Sigmar 4, where I will fight and then I can immediately pick another unit that is in combat range, so within 3 inches of my unit, and that unit can fight immediately after this unit. And that unit gets +1 to hit. The reason this is pretty effective is because what happens is I can make a unit, I can basically fight with 2 units at the same time. Okay, that's pretty cool. Lord-Terminos fighting at the same time as 6 Reclusians. Cool. That's 2 hits versus just, making them fight alternating. The reason this becomes really, really effective in Stormcast Eternals is, really, really effective is too strong, sorry. The reason other people, not me, think this is effective is because of the artifact that you can have in Stormcast Eternals called the Quicksilver Draft. And the effect is that once per battle in any combat phase, this unit has strike first for the rest of the turn. Cool. Big thumb up, strike first. So why is this cool? What happens is in my opponent's turn, they charge into my army, my Reclusians and my Terminos, who are next to each other. Then I pop the strike first spell, or ability, sorry. And then what will happen is the Terminos will fight. Then the Reclusians will then immediately be able to fight next in the normal step. So you have a strike first step and the normal step, because they will bump up. They won't bump into the strike first step, but they will become first in the activation order in the strike normal step. So the idea is that you have this really big unit that if you charge it, then it's going to be able to hit you before you hit them. And Reclusians have featured pretty heavily in a lot of competitive lists. Lord-Terminos, not as much. I personally think that you are doing a lot for not a lot of reward. And if your opponent knows that you can do it, then I don't know what they're like. You're probably just going to be shooting at your Reclusians, shooting at this guy, whatever it might be. So I personally don't overly rate that combination at all. And then he's an okay fighter. I'd much rather have Bastion. If I'm spending those points, I'd much rather have Bastion in my list, who's an okay frontline fighter as well. So that's what I'd much prefer. So I'm going to put the Lord-Terminos in ineffective. For me personally, I think other people maybe would disagree with me. Let me know in the comments below what you think about the Lord-Terminos. and whether or not you think it's better. But I don't think it's. I'd be tempted to put it in like least effective, but I'm going to put it in ineffective. There he is. In this wall of gold, I was unable to find him. I will put him in ineffective for me. Don't do that. I'm putting it there. Like, I'm 2 toes down. Let's go in least effective. Next unit we're going to look at is the Lord-Veritant. I know you might ask yourself, what the hell is it? It's the blind priest unit from the new Age of Sigmar launch box. Lord-Veritant is a priest, as I've said, for only 130 points, which is good, that can also unbind spells as if it were a wizard, which is actually pretty good for your army, because normally Stormcast can't have a lot of wizarding levels, therefore they don't have access to a lot of unbinds. So being able to unbind and also be a priest, pretty nice. There are a bunch of priests that we could talk about in a moment, and we will. Therefore, it's not as effective as some of the other priests, but a priest is good in this book and therefore is fine. That's what it's going to do. It's effective. Well, not effective, but it's fine. Right, next 2 units we're going to look at are the Knight-Relictor and the Lord-Relictor, seeing as we're talking about priests. They're both a priest level 1. There you go. And they have the same profile, whatever, 6 health, 3 up save. And they're not there for damage. They're there to be a support model, which is cool. And both of them bring a different, slightly different milkshake to the yard. The Lord-Relictor gets +1 to chanting rolls, and the Knight-Relictor, in your shooting phase, picks an enemy unit within 12 inches, not wholly within 12, and then on a 2+, you subtract 1 from ward rolls from the enemy unit. I personally prefer the Knight-Relictor. Now there's a mitigating factor there. I like the reducing a ward save down, because oftentimes the most effective units you see in books have ward saves. Those are the ones that are taken, or they're given a ward save as an example. So reducing the ward save down is great, especially as in your shooting phase you can do that, and then you can shoot with your long strikes or shoot with your vigilors, stacking those abilities. So I have a Knight-Relictor, I make a unit -1 ward save, I shoot with my vigilors, now I've got +1 to hit against them, then I shoot my long strikes at them. That's pretty good. But they also have -1 ward save for the rest of the turn. So when I finally charge in, they also are reducing their ward save down as well. So it feels like a really good ability. But if you don't end up coming up against a lot of armies that do have a ward save, and that's pretty rare, then the Lord-Relictor, with his consistently more effective prayers with +1 to chanting roll, is also very effective. So I'm not necessarily saying that one is better than the other, although I personally think the Knight-Relictor is generally better. The Lord-Relictor is going to make you have more consistent prayers, which as a force multiplier is pretty good. So I'm going to put both of them into effective because they're priests, and probably one of your better spells. You have translocation as a prayer, so being able to teleport around the board. And also you have the ability to bless weapons as well as do a heal. So +1 attack and do heals, both of which I think are good. They're not necessarily as strong as some of the others that we're seeing out there. And therefore, if the best thing in your book or the best force multiplier in your book was a prayer, then these will probably move into most effective. But they're going to be ineffective. You choose which one you like. Let me know which one you like in the comments. Our next unit is the Knight-Vexilor. Knight-Vexilor is a Stormcast hero with a stat line to match, and the reason that you would take a Knight-Vexilor is because you're able to pick D3 friendly Stormcast units wholly within 12, and you can add 3 to the control score and heal D3 for 120 points. It's D3, so it's an unreliable amount. It's heal a nominal amount of stuff, and it's add a nominal amount to your control score. It's rubbish and is in least effective. Our next unit is the Knight-Judicator. It is a hero-based dedicated missile unit that doesn't do as much damage as you would want it to at 18 inches, doesn't stack, doesn't give any abilities, and isn't as effective as other shooting units in the game, so it's going at the bottom. Next unit we're going to look at is one that many of you may have in a box right now. It's the new Reclusians. Now, these are pretty good. These are pretty good because they're pretty cheap. We're going to put these into probably ineffective, and we're going to compare them to our Meteoric Grandhammers. So a reinforced unit of Reclusians is only 2/3 the price the unit of Grandhammers are. 2/3 the price, and for not the same amount of output, but about the same amount of output. Against a 2-up save, we're getting something like 11 damage. For Grandhammers, we're getting 16 damage. And then 21 damage against a 3-up save, and then 13 damage. So there is a significant difference between the two. But you are only paying 2/3 the price for the Reclusian unit, which is pretty nice, as well as all the buffs that you're able to potentially stack on them. So they're pretty good, but they're good because they're cheap. And I don't know if Meteoric Grandhammers are too expensive or Reclusians are too cheap, but they kind of, I think Reclusians kind of maybe trump them in that situation, in that they're like slightly better, although Trump being used for like a good word is obviously dumb. But either way, the other thing to say about the Reclusians is that they've got the combo with things like Lord-Terminos, and if you take the Gryph Charger guy, which we'll talk about in a moment, you can get the option for a fight twice in a specific situation, which is quite fun. So you can maybe put some output. But between the two, ultimately, the Grandhammers are going to do more damage. So if you are lacking the ability to absolutely wipe something, it's the Grandhammers that are going to do more damage. So I think you're sometimes going to have to ask yourself which one you want to get. I just want to make an additional point. Like, when at one point, one of the best armies in Age of Sigmar was Mega Gargants, and they had something like an 80% win rate. And the problem with Mega Gargants is they were what we call a DPT check, or a damage per turn check. You basically could never do enough damage to them in a turn where you were able to bring them down quick enough that they weren't going to outscore you. In that situation, you would be choosing Grandhammers, even though they cost more points than the Reclusians, because you would be able to actually get more output, even though it was costing you more points. And yeah, sure, if there was a situation where you could get 2 units of Reclusians for the price of 1 Grandhammer unit, but the way Age of Sigmar 4 or Age of Sigmar combat works is it's you go, I go. So if I was to strike with 1 unit of Reclusians, the Mega Gargant could hit the other unit of Reclusians, maybe wipe them before they swing. So sometimes it's about raw output versus like the ability to have stuff that's be cheaper. And if it's 2/3 the price but 2/3 the output, not saying that right now in the game there is that problem army/build that exists, but it's something to be worth thinking about when you're writing lists. All right, next unit we'll look at is the Lord-Vigilant on Gryph-stalker. He's from the new launch box. 180 points for this, not from my melee character. There's only one reason he's got a terrible combat profile. He's got 8 health and a 3-up save. The reason that you would take him is because you're trying to make a massive smash unit thanks to his once per battle army ability. So it's only once per battle in any combat phase. You can pick a friendly non-hero Ruination Chamber unit. So this would be either your Prosecutors or Reclusians, wholly within 12 inches. The target can use 2 fight abilities in this phase after the first is used. However, the target has strike last. Now, we're going to talk about the Storm Covenant in a minute, and you are going to be able to give your units strike first. So there is maybe ways to kind of avoid them needing strike last. And ultimately, if you're running Reclusians with their 3-up save and their ability to get a 5-up ward save, they're very survivable, especially with Finest Hour. They're on like a 2-up, 5-up. That's pretty good. And then Blessed Weapons on that unit, then that unit of Reclusians is going to be fighting twice, and then with an extra attack each, with an amazing armor save, an amazing ward save, and you can absolutely go to town. That package is going to cost you about 600-ish points to do. Is that worth it for a once per battle ability? That's the real question. I don't think the Lord-Vigilant and Gryph-stalker, I don't think it's worth it for the once per battle. He's very susceptible to just being taken off, I think. Like, not incredibly fragile, but I think fragile enough, and doesn't do enough output. So I'm going to put him in ineffective, but a fun thing that you can do sometimes, which is, very much like the 2 new knights, the Tornus and the Azyros. Like a fun thing that you can do, maybe, and could be fun. Definitely down at the club. It could be a really fun combo to build, but I think you'll end up getting slapped. Next unit we're going to look at is the Storm Coven. And if you listen to my review, I did talk about these guys being an auto-include. Well, ignore the fact that this unit of 3 models has got a really hilarious 18-inch range shooting attack, which basically makes them the Knight-Judicator that we talked about earlier that got in the ineffective tier. Or that they've got a pretty good combat profile. 3 models at 3 health each with a 3-up save makes them a 9 health wizard. Right? That's right, a 9 health wizard, which is very, very effective. And if they're contesting an objective, they add 1 to this unit's power level, making them a level 2 wizard. So this is cool because it's 210 points, which is expensive, sure. But for a 2-cast wizard, because you'll always just stick them on an objective, who are able to fight, able to shoot, and able to cast spells in an army that really struggles to get those casts. So the Storm Coven is going to go, when I find it, yes, this unit is going to go into most effective. And in fact, just so I'm clear with you all, it probably works like that they're the most effective unit in the book. 2-cast wizard, excellent. Power level 2, really survivable. Also, if the unit gets wiped out, you can bring the unit with half the models rounded up back, thanks from your Stormcast ability. 11 out of 10. Our next unit is the Knight-Arcanum. So the Knight-Arcanum is a wizard, a level 1 wizard, which is cool. So already makes it very effective. It's only 120 points, which is bang on for what you want for a wizard to be, around 100 points. And, you know, a good 6 health, 3-up save wizard, yes, let's go. It's definitely worth 120 points. In addition, you add +1 to casting rolls this unit when you use a summon ability, so when you bring manifestations on, and you add 1 to banishment, which, with the new Battle Scroll update to banishments, where if there are multiple banishments on the board, you can add additional +1s. You could actually really reliably get rid of banishments. And this game is all about having banishments on the board. I mean, you have to have banishments because everyone has them. So it feels like it plays into the meta game, which is very good. I'm going to put them in the effective tier because list building, I think, means you sometimes don't bring the Knight-Arcanum versus some of the other units because that +1, while really nice, isn't necessarily game-changing enough, where it's like a 3d6, like you would see with like a Skaven Greyseer to cast or something similar. So +1 is fine, but it's not brilliant, so it's just going to go ineffective. Karazai is next. Karazai the Scarred. It's a frontline melee character. Specifically, Karazai is very good in Age of Sigmar 4 because of the current General's Handbook. So 20 health with a control score of 5, great, and a 3-up save. And don't forget, we already talked about Praetors. So you bring in Karazai, you bring in Praetors, and you get 480 points for Karazai. Okay, fine. This will give you a 20 health, 3-up save, 5-up ward save combat unit. But in addition, to add to its survivability, it has this Ancient Masters of War ability where you can reduce the combat attacks from a unit down from the melee weapons in any combat phase, which stacks with the current General's Handbook for the ability of an Honor Guard unit to also reduce the attacks characteristic down. So when you do charge into Karazai, this unit is going to make it so that you are fighting a unit with -2 attacks, and this unit has a 3-up, 5-up. 3-up armor save, 5-up ward save. And then it's going to slap you with its attacks. Not necessarily super outputty, but an incredibly good anvil, which is exactly what I think of as dragons. So a really good anvil to get hit. So Karazai is very effective, especially in the current GHB. Yes, very effective in the current GHB, or most effective in the current GHB. Everything I said about Karazai is true also for Krondys, with the exception of reducing damage down. But for a slightly more expensive frame, that's the way to think of it, I guess, then you are getting a 2-cast wizard, one of your few 2-cast wizards in the book, that also has got +2 to his casting rolls, which is amazing. And in addition, has got an amazing spell called Atavistic Tempest, where you can subtract 1 from the Ren characteristic of a target, subtract 1 from the hit rolls from a target, or you can subtract 1 from save rolls for a target, which stacks super well for your army. Very effective, 5-up ward save, very good, very cool. Feels like you just have to build around it, and the Praetors, but it's going in there. They're about the same. So yeah, very, very effective. Next up, we have Ionus Cryptborn, the Warden of Lost Souls. Now, this is a 16 health, 3-up save, 2-cast priest for 400 points, who does some okay damage combat, and also has got a really fun Spirit Scouring Flame ability where you can give a unit the Soul Burned keyword, and then in any shooting phase, they keep taking continuous mortal wound damage from Soul Burned, which is good. Also, Priest 2 is a really powerful ability because what you're able to do when you try and do a prayer is you can roll a dice to attempt a prayer, and then bank those points, and then almost guarantee you getting the second prayer off that you attempt, which will probably be a prayer that you're attempting that you really want to do, which is really, really nice. So that makes him very effective. The Soul Burned ability is really effective. In list building is also really effective because of the War Master keyword. That's also true for a lot of other units, but worth mentioning that this support character is also going to unlock the units that you want to bring, which is nice. So I'm going to put Ionis up there in very effective. Also, you can Praetor him for a 5-up ward save. So I think it's pretty good. The next units we're going to look at are all of the different Dracoth subtypes. There are 3 of them. And yes, there is a difference between all 3, but the frame is the important part. With a good wound cap, there's only 2 models in the unit, though. Good wound cap, good armor save, and they do fine damage. You can reinforce them up to a unit of 4, obviously, which is what a lot of people do. So I'm going to put them all in effective, is where they're going. They're pretty good. There's an argument that some of them could come into fine. I don't really want to argue about which one's the better one right now. They're all there. They're effective damage dealers. Liberators are a perfect example of a unit that is perfectly useless. Liberators is a unit of 5 models, 2 health each, and a 3-up save, which feels very, very good, right? And they have crit mortals on their stat line as well, so you're like, actually, that's quite nice. A unit of reinforced 10, though 10 is going to be 21 attacks, and if you bless weapons, could be 31 attacks with crit mortals. But their job is done better by other units that do damage. Their ability to hold the line is done better by other units that are more survivable. Their job to like charge or fight or hold objectives is done better by other units as well. So while Liberators are kind of perfectly pointed and perfectly effective for what their War Scroll does, inside of the book, everything specializes better and is still like, and therefore that specialization makes them more useful in the situation that you need them to be. You don't need Age of Sigmar 4, on probably most games actually, isn't really a game of like a solid stat line. It's a game of hyper specialization in most cases and posing a problem. So Liberators, while fun, are just going to go into least effective because they, while fine for their points cost, I want to be really clear, and you probably even could get some use out of them. You put them on the tabletop, they're probably good. There's almost always a better choice for their points cost than them, so don't take them. Our next unit are Gryph-hounds, 6 models. They kind of are the same as Aetherwings, but they're not as fast. The poor old fellas, which is rough. They're also beasts, so contesting objectives makes them they're not very effective at that either, unfortunately. So while I feel like they could kind of go in the fine category, I think the Gryph-hounds, unfortunately, for Gryph-hound fans, are going to go in the least effective category because their job should be doing battle tactics and grabbing objectives, and they're not as fast as some of the other units, and therefore they're not as good. Actually, I'm changing my mind. They are 6 models, right? Okay, there's 6 models, right? And they are able to be strung out on a screen for only 80 points. So I'm changing them. I'm changing them up to fine. I don't know if you really need a screen in a Stormcast list, but 6 models wide is a good screen, so I'm going to put them into fine. Our next unit is the Lord-Ordinator. He's going in least effective because he buffs ballistas, and ballistas are also least effective, and he's rubbish. Next up, we are going to look quickly at the manifestations that you're able to get. Now, the little disc that you can run around on is actually pretty fun. So I'm going to put. I mean, these are all together. All the manifestations are together because you have to take them as one. So I'm just going to put them all in effective. Although I guess actually you're going to be casting them. So actually, Comet is effective. The little teleport disc is really effective, and then the hammers is like least effective. So don't take the hammers. But the other 2 are fun to cast. So definitely take those. Our next unit is the Lord-Celestant on Stardrake, and I love this guy. He's really cool. So he's got 18 health, 3-up save, stick a Praetor nearby. All of a sudden, we've got 18 health, 3-up, 5-up. Okay, cool. We love that. Is a non-named character, so we can give him the strike first potion if we want to. So if we get charged, we can strike, we can hit before them. Cool. Good combat profile. We like that. Kind of just a fun little shooting profile. In addition, move 12, nice and fast, which is great. Is a little bit of a force multiplier. Lord of the Host. Add 1 to the attack characteristic of other friendly Extremist Chamber units while they're in 12. And we've already said the Extremist Chamber units are effective. So we've got a guy that makes Extremist units even better, +1 to the attack characteristic. Big thumbs. But the reason I love the Stardrake is because of their their rampage called Cavernous Jaws, where pick an enemy unit in combat, roll 3 dice for each roll that equals or exceeds the target's health characteristic one model in the target unit is slain. Now, it's very, very unlikely that you're going to roll 3 6s, but you could, and you could eat 3 Vanguard, which is cool. The fact that you equal to or exceed is also really nice. Sometimes it's you have to beat, so 6 wound models are off the table. But in this case, like you can equal it. So that's some really, really, really fun stuff. You also, yeah, I love this. I think it's a great character. I think you can have a load of fun on the tabletop. I think your opponent is actually going to struggle. They can't necessarily say to themselves, I'm going to charge that Star Drake, because if he's got the strike first and like strike first ability, and then he could also eat you before, unbelievably good. So I don't know which of the pictures is the right picture. So I'm just going to put, let me go look actually and make sure I get the right one. So it's the one with the big hammer. So that one is going all the way up. Ladies and gentlemen, you might not think it, but Star Drake in the year of 2024, most effective. Our next unit is the Drakesworn Templar. Now, he's 440 points, which is 40 points more expensive than Iridan. And Iridan brings lots of... Not Iridan, sorry. The priest. What is his name? I forget his name. There's so many units in this book. I'm losing my mind. Okay, whatever this guy is, the dragon nonce. I forget his name. That guy. He's only 400 points. Ionus, thank you. And Ionus has lots of special rules and is a bit of a force multiplier. The Drakesworn Templar is not even really a damage piece, really. He's kind of got what we've just seen from the Star Drake, the other Star Drake, Lord-Celestant, but it's worse. I wouldn't take him for any reason, especially with other choices inside the book. And so I'm just going to put him in like least effective. I'm actually going to really punish him and put him down here because like he's fine and can kind of tank like Karazai and Krondys, but they're just significantly better. So there are other options. So do not take that and take the other options instead. Our next 2 units are the Dracoline units. So we have the actual Dracoline unit themselves, Evocators on Dracolines, which is Unit 3. These are legends, yes, but currently they're match play playable. They're playable until summer next year. So I've covered all those. Super worth covering. The Evocator on Celestial Dracoline and the Lord-Arcanum on Celestial Dracoline. Unfortunately, neither of them have anything really worth overly going on about, especially when there are other better versions of both of them in the book. They're not terrible, but they're much worse than many other units in the book, and therefore I'm just going to put them in least effective because don't buy them now. And if you already own them, then I'm sure you're going to give them a try and try to make them work, but you know for a fact that it's like an uphill battle, so we're going to put them down there. Our next unit is also one of the units that is going to be legended next summer, but Evocators, unfortunately, it's just very good. 5 models, 3 health each, 3 up save. That's right, I said that. That's pretty great. But the Evocator weapons is really nice. 180 points for a unit of 5. These, I think, do about as much output as the Reclusians. More bodies on that control score 2 can't be right. That's insane. More bodies than the Reclusians on an objective as well. They're up there. They're battling with other units in that kind of top sphere with the Reclusians and the Grandhammer guys. Like, really, really good. Our next unit is Gardas, Steel Soul, and I love this guy. Gardas has got a terrible combat profile. But he's a classic Stormcast 6 health and 3 up save. The reason I really... an inbuilt 5 up ward save for 170 points. That's not bad. But the reason that I like Gardas is because once per battle, you can use the Saintly Assault ability where you pick up to 3 friendly visible Stormcast Eternal infantry units holding within 6. For the rest of the turn, add 1 to charge rolls for the targets. And then add 1 to the attack characteristic of the target's melee weapons. This is great. Obviously, if you're deep striking everything, +1 to charge takes them from 9-inch charges to 8-inch charges. And +1 to the attacks characteristic of their melee weapons is also solid, especially for loads of your different units. So I like Gardas a lot. So I'm a huge fan of Gardas. And I'm going to put Gardas up into the effective. Because again, it's kind of like a Bastion conversation. Gardas and Bastion, Bastion and Gardas. Like, you make the choice. Like what you're happening, but like +1 attack is really good. It'll stack with blast weapons. +2 attacks, go crazy. Our next unit is Gavriel Sureheart. He has the stat line of a Stormcast Eternal hero, which is 6 health and 3 up save. And the unique thing he does is he allows you to charge on 3d6, but you drop the lowest dice. Well, I mean, it's a dice of your choice. So you go from a statistical 7-inch charge to a 9-inch charge exclusively for Warrior Chamber infantry units. I'm going to put him in ineffective, but there might be some fringe case uses for him. Our next unit is Vanguard-Raptors with Hurricane Crossbows. And if you are buying this kit and not building long strikes, you're probably making a mistake. But hear me out. Here's a good argument. These guys are now, for no reason, 100 points for 3. It's pretty bananas, right? And they get a lot of shots. They got 4 shots per model with crit 2 hits. And they do have anti-infantry rend 1, right? Not bad. Like the numbers don't say like you're going to do a ton of damage, but I do like that you can get a lot of output. If you're not taking tons of these because they're so cheap, which is definitely a mistake, don't do that, but I want to do it, then the reason that you maybe would take these because they are so cheap is thanks to the coordinated strike ability, where you pick an enemy that had any damage points allocated to this turn by attacks made with the Hurricane Crossbows, +1 to wound rolls for combat attacks made by friendly Vanguard chamber units that target that enemy for the rest of the turn, which is pretty cool because the Paladors, or at least Paladors with javelins, or even hand axes, getting +1 to wound is really nice in combat, and will make them more effective. So if you are deciding you're going to run down the Palador route, then I probably would end up, like, even 100 points is literally nothing. 2 units of 3, deep striking to do your battle tactics as well, maybe. They're pretty limited range. I'm going to put them as fine. I really want to make them effective. I'm going to put them as fine, but there you go. Our next unit is another missile unit, the Judicators with Skybolt Bows. They have got an okay output. A unit of 5 is not bad. You can reinforce them. They're only 140 points. They've got 2 health each, 3 up saves. Pretty nice. When you reinforce them, a big unit of 10, he's not actually doing that much damage, truth be told. But they do have a pretty cool ability where you can shoot a monster, and on a 3-up, they can't use rampages for the next turn, which is situationally kind of okay. So I'm going to put them in ineffective because they're a better shooting units, but they do have like a fringe case use. Our next 2 units are pretty famous. We have the Knight Draconis and Stormdrake Guard. Stormdrake Guard, I think, are very viable. They've got a big wound pool, they've got a good armor save, and they have a lot of attacks. They're very tough to get, very tough to do damage to. Yeah, I feel that they're pretty solid as a unit, and they can do some mortals when they move across stuff. So I'm going to rate them, the Draconic Guard. I'm going to put them up as effective. That's what I think that they are. Whereas the Knight Draconis helps them scale up, but they're already so expensive, and what he brings to the table is +1 attack, which doesn't feel like it's enough of an output. So a reinforced unit of 4 is like 660 points. And then for a Knight Draconis, I add +1 attack, which I think is, I'm not a vibe with. So I'm going to put him in fine. Now I'm going to put him in ineffective, just to be clear. So that's why I rate the big Dragons. Right, next up we're going to look at the Paladors, and there are 3 types of Paladors to choose from, and I know a lot of you are excited about using the new Stormstrike Paladors, but unfortunately the Stormstrike Paladors aren't actually very good as like a combat unit, even though they kind of were scaled and modeled to look like that they would be a good fighty unit. Look at their profile when it's been reinforced, it's really very, very bad. Like, they are not a good combat unit, and they're not a particularly good defensive unit, because I don't know why you would really have them. Stormdrake would hold the line better than these. However, then you get into the Vanguard Paladors, both of which are so much better. Also, just point out that the Paladors, to be more effective, you need for your Warrior Chamber units to die, which is a shame. So the new guys are just generally terror bad, and we'll put them in the tier in a minute. But Vanguard Paladors with shock hand axes and also the Starstrike Javelins are very effective. Let's talk about why. They both have run, shoot, and charge, which is incredible because they move 14 inches. So this unit of 3 models with 5 health and a 3-up save are now going like up to 20 inches shooting and charging. I really like the Vanguard Paladors with shock hand axes because they end up with a pretty amazing output, I would say, when you reinforce them, but I'm wrong. And more effective than them is the Vanguard Paladors with Starstrike Javelins, because they have this ability charge in volley where they get to do their javelins again in combat, and it ends up being very, very outputty and very popular. Either a unit of 6 being reinforced and doing all of the output is really good, or even units of 3 because they're so tanky. Like a unit of 3 is 220 points, 230 points. They're around that range. So we're going to put the new guys as least effective because they're garbage. We're going to put the hand axes into just fine because unfortunately they're not as good as the bows, even though I really want them to be. And then not the bows, the javelins. And then the javelins are going into effective. And they are very, very effective. They're very good. All right, the next unit we look at are Vindicators. Vindicators are a bit like Liberators. They're some shield dudes with a spear. They have this anti-charge rend, which is pretty nice, and they also get strike first if they're charged, which is cool. All of which is to say they can't play a proactive game, they play a defensive game, and the game is generally pretty much about being proactive. I know standing on circles is a key element to winning, but I'm going to put them in ineffective. I think I'll put them in there, but they're basically the same as Libs. They're the same as Libs, and therefore they do nothing, so I'm going to put them in least effective. Our next unit are Vanguard Hunters, a unit of 5 models with, again, your classic Stormcast stat line of 2 health, 3 up save for a unit of 5, obviously reinforceable to unit of 10. The good thing about these guys, compared to some of the other infantry blocks, is that they do have run, shoot, and charge, because they are Vanguard chambers, so that does make them a little bit more useful. And they have a really fun ability where you are able to mark a unit to be hunted, and you can get +2 inches to their move. They're 120 points, pretty cheap as well, so a little bit more mobile. I'm going to change them up from least effective to ineffective, though, because, again, like you see with the other infantry blocks, there are other units that are faster, other units that do more damage, so they're not really useful. Vanquishers are pretty interesting. Again, 5 models in the unit, 2 health, 3 up save. That's what their job is. They're 110 points. They do have this fun ability where you add +1 to the damage characteristic of their weapons if the unit has 5 or more models, which a lot of like cavalry and other stuff does end up doing. They've got 2 attacks each, which is pretty cool. And if you have a unit of 10, you can go. A unit of 10 can have 20 attacks. Now, obviously, with blessed weapons, that's 30 attacks. And if you were to take our good man, not Vandus, whatever his name is, Gardus, we could potentially have this unit have 40 attacks, which is pretty cool. The anti-infantry rend 1, and also damage 2. But that's a lot of stuff that you're using to make them happen. They move slowly. I'm going to put them in ineffective, but they do. I'm going to put them in fine because they do have a job role, but you are going to need to add a bunch of like stuff to make it work. Next unit are Protectors, not prosecutors, Protectors. It's a unit of 5 models, and they have, for 220 points, they've got 3 health each, 3 up save. So, you can have 30 health with 3 up save, and they've got 4 attacks each. You can have 40 attacks from a reinforced unit. If you want to, 3s and 3s, round 1, damage 1. You can give them Star Sword Maces, which, are 2 and 5 models. So 4 of the models can have Star Sword Maces, give you 4 attacks with damage 3, which is kind of okay. And they also can gain a 5-up ward save while they're near a friendly Stormcast Eternals infantry hero. So a 5-up ward save on 30 health is genuinely amazing. 440 points is going to be 30 health on a 5-up ward. So it'd be great for contesting an objective and building a really tanky build. Actually, not too bad. The 5-up ward save make these super fun. So I'm going to put these into fine. That's where I'm going to put them. Our next unit is Retributors. Again, this is one of those Paladin builds. So it's 5 models with 3 wounds with a 3-up save. But the Retributor Lightning Hammer is pretty good. 2 attacks per model. 3s and 3s, rend 1, damage 2 with crit mortals. If you were to end up sticking, blessed weapons on this unit, they are going to absolutely slap. They are up there. And you can also get +1 to hit to this unit if any models were slain as well. So very, very nice. A good amount of output. I'm putting these bad boys up into effective is where I'm going to put them. Our next unit is the Knight-Azyros. It's the alternate build to Neave Blacktalon. It's not very good, doesn't do anything, and is bad. Does have a teleport ability, but it's rubbish. Our next unit is the Knight-Incanter. Knight-Incanter will be going away in July. But it's got is a level 1 wizard, has got a once per game ability for 140 points to auto-stop a spell, which I'm going to put as fine. Like, there genuinely might be, like, the crushing spell. It's not really how the game is built at the moment. But, like, for tempo, at least, there might be a turn where your opponent wants to absolutely do a thing, a bit like with Be'lakor, and being able to turn that spell off is great. So there we go. And also a lot of criticism on my putting least effective Knight-Azyros. We're going to put the Knight-Azyros into fine because she is literally the ability to unlock the Vanguard-Raptors, the Longstrikes, and also the Paladors into a regiment. So this War Scroll and model is actually so mega garbage rules-wise. The only justifiable reason that it exists is it lets you take other units. So it's a tax as a unit, which puts it from least effective into fine, but offends me on a personal level. The next unit is the Knight Quester from the new box, and he is very bad. Our next unit is the Lord Castellant. It's important to know. Castellant. Same Stormcast profile as everything ever. Has this really fun ability sometimes in your hero phase to pick an objective within 12. For the rest of the turn, Freddy Stormcast have a 6-up ward save, and ward rolls can be made for enemy units contesting the objective as well. All this for 150 points. I'm going to put it as ineffective because like it's a fun little fringe case combo like some of the other stuff that you can see here. But ultimately, you probably aren't going to take it. The Lord-Celestant is also a unit you can take in Stormcast, but you shouldn't. The Knight-Venator is actually pretty interesting. Knight-Venator has got the ability, once per battle, for 190 points to do either D6 mortal damage to a unit or D6 plus 3 mortal damage if it's a monster. Now, this is pretty interesting. It's only usable once per battle across the army, so taking multiple of these isn't going to be very smart. And then its shooting profile after that is pretty garbage with only 6 shots. That are damage 1, but a nice healthy 24 inches. Moves 12 inches, so could be good for things like take the flanks and moving around the board. It's got a pretty high cost, so I'm going to put it as ineffective, but fringe case usage could be really fun. Pop around, do some shooting. I think after that initial blow, though, that 190 points becomes less effective over turn. I think sometimes think about your points allowance being per turn versus across a whole battle. After he does that once per battle ability, is that 190 points going to bring value to you every turn? And the answer is no. He immediately becomes worth a lot less. So I'm going to put him as ineffective. Our next unit is a Lord Aquila. Lord Aquila, he has got the ability to run and shoot and do all that other stuff, although its combat profile is so bad. Why would you want to run and shoot and do all those other things? And the ability to teleport 2 units. But you've already got an army that can teleport loads of stuff anyway. You don't need more, especially on a 180-point unit that's Garbo. Our next unit is a Lord Arcanum on Gryph-charger. He's a level 1 wizard, which is pretty...
perseverance is appreciated.
Thank you so much to someone who donated some money to King Grico in the chat for donating £10. Let's go. Or if you're watching this tier list, you can always support me on Patreon for this stupendously long review. Anyway, this thing is a level 1 wizard, but it only benefits Sacrosanct units, so I'm putting it in ineffective. That's where it's living. It's also 220 points, which is insane. The next unit is the Chariot, Stormstrike Chariot. It's got 10 health with 3-up save and a very low and aggressive point cost of 150 points, which is nice. Seeing it's pretty fast, move 10, which is nice. And when it charges, it does mortals, but when it also does power through, it does an additional D3 mortals as well. You could start stacking quite a lot of mortal damage on this from this unit. I think the fact that it's quite cheap, but aggressive enough and fast enough that it could do battle tactics, close off sections of the board. I don't think it's bad, and I'm going to put it in fine as a section, and I'm going to put it like quite high up in fine. Next up is the Lord Arcanum on Toralon, which is a level 1 wizard that's got control value 5, move 14, so it's fast, 12 health, 3-up save, good. 280 points for this wizard is okay. Obviously, Garbo in combat for some reason. But a pretty fun series of things. Gives +1 to cast wizards wholly within 12. Has this really fun ability where in the enemy hero phase, you pick an enemy hero within 30 inches, and then you roll a dice plus what you roll a number of dice equal to their power level +1. For each 2+, you inflict a mortal damage. Let's go, right? Nagash taking potentially 9 mortal damage in the enemy hero phase. Every enemy hero phase, pretty scary. And then he's also got this fun ability in combat as a rampage, where you pick other Stormcast Eternals units, not keyword locked, to Sacrosanct or anything within combat range, and those targets have a 5-up ward save, but you get strike last. Like, good, effective. Like, I'm going to have to shout that it's not most effective, but it feels great, especially in the right matchup. I'm taking it. Our next unit is a Lord Arcanum. He's a level 1 wizard, pretty good. +1 to casting rolls when you're trying to summon, pretty nice. And then also has got an ability where you can heal D6 to a manifestation, which is genuinely pretty interesting if you go for a really cheap singular wizard to bring, obviously, the Crunchspine Incarnate. So I'm going to just put him as fine. He's a level 1 wizard. That's fine with some bonuses, which is cool. Our next unit is a Lord Exorcist. Lord Exorcist is 150 points, which is spenny. Don't get me wrong. But he's a level 1 wizard, okay, which is already worth 100 points. But in addition, this is an amazing ability. Models cannot be returned to enemy units within 12 inches of this unit, not just wholly within 12, but within 12, which is really good against some builds. And then Purifying Blast, is done in your hero phase, and pick a visible enemy unit within 18, roll a dice on 2+. If the target has any ritual points, remove a number of ritual points from it. And if the target has no ritual points, inflict D3 mortal damage. All of these are great. This guy is going straight up to effective. I love this guy. This guy's solid. Our next unit is the Lord-Imperatant, and the reason you would take the Lord-Imperatant at 150 points is because once per battle in your movement phase, you can pick up to 3 friendly Stormcast Eternals units holding than 12 of this unit that was set up this turn using Signs of the Storm, and each target can immediately move D3 inches. The targets cannot move into combat during any part of that move. And the nice thing about that Stormcast Eternals, like keyword, is it's not like locked to infantry. However, I think if I was being honest, I would prefer the +1 to charge that I get from Gardas, because I also am going to be able to also be able to get +1 attack. But I think I can stack both together, the Lord-Imperatant and Gardas, which would be so funny. So I'm going to put him up into fine, because it's okay, but it's only once per battle. In fact, I'm going to bring it down. I'm going to put it in ineffective, because it's like a fringe case use with many of these others, like the ability to fight twice, etc. So I'm going to put him in ineffective, but maybe that could be a thing. Our next unit is the Quest of Soulsworn. This is 6 models, which is pretty interesting, each for 230 points. Each model's got 3 health. That's 18 health on a 3-up save. They have the ability to pick an objective and give it a quest marked rule, and then if you're contesting the quest marked objective, you get a 5-up ward save, and you add 3 to this unit's control score, which is pretty wild. So there'll be control score of 9. Yeah, I think control score of 9, and they'll have 18 health on a 3-up, 5-up, which is insane. They also have a built-in teleport, and also you have the Portaloo to teleport. So these are super effective. So they're going straight to the top of the pile into the most effective category. Our next unit is Steel Hearts Champions. I'm just going to put them immediately into least effective. Our next unit is Sequitors. Sequitors is a unit of 5 models, 170 points for this kind of combat unit that's very similar to others but doesn't have much going for it. So in the same vein as Libs, other units do something else better. They're least effective. Our next unit is Vanda's Hammerhand. It's 210 points for a pretty rubbish frontline combat unit that's able to simultaneously fight with a non-hero warrior chamber unit. But unlike when earlier on we were talking about the Quicksilver draft, he's not going to be able to take that, so he's not going to be able to gimmick that. You do get +1 to hit if you fight with a unit after this unit, but you can get that from a CP and save yourself 210 points. Goes into least effective. The Fast Riders are also apparently a unit you can take, but don't. Zandire's Truth Seekers is a unit of 3 models for 130 points. And the fun thing about this unit is they have the ability to take Taros, which is a token that they have. And if you hit with your shooting attack, or wound with your shooting attack, whichever, into a unit, until the start of your next turn, that unit isn't going to be able to use commands. And while I'm off the top of my head, I can't think of which units exactly that would affect, I think that's fine. I think that's fine. The ability to shut down commands is maybe situational. Maybe it's ineffective. Is maybe ineffective is where I'll put it. But no, effective. No, it's going to be fine. That could be really useful in the right situations. Our next unit is Stormsire's Cursebreakers. 3 models, 3 health, 3-up save. This is a wizard as long as one of the models is on the board, which is pretty good. 9 attacks with crit mortals, all for 130 points. I'll take that. A 9 health wizard with a 3-up save that has 9 attacks that do crit mortals for 130 points is actually stonking. And in addition, has got the ability, if they're contesting an objective that you control, you pick a friendly non-hero Stormcast Eternals unit wholly within 12 and give that unit +1 to wound in every combat phase. Like, I reckon that's straight fire for 130 points. That's what I'm going to say. So there we go. Okay, so that's the end of the tier list. It's pretty interesting. If we take a look at what that looks like from here, not as much in the quite a bit in the bottom end, but quite a lot in the top end as well. And I think what's fun about the top end, as an example, is I want to run a big dragon. Cool. I've got 2 to choose from. They do different things, and I can give them ward saves. Or Star Drake and try and like munch stuff up. That's cool. All right, I don't want to necessarily run dragons, and instead I like to go like more infantry-based, where you've got some amazingly fast units with Ynastra and the Prosecutors, and you've got everything that Bastion is able to bring to your army, as well as Gardas for those deep strikes, which is vibes, and I think that's really fun as well. So you've got like a pretty good like kind of list there. You've got loads of units that can do some solid damage, and they all do kind of like about the same, but not really. Like Stormdrake Guard, Paladors, the Reclusians, the Grandhammers, they've all got a role, which I think people will argue about. You've got some priests for support, for reducing wards and all sorts of stuff, which is pretty fun. I will say that through the process of doing this video, I have felt a little bit like many of the units lack an identity, and they definitely lack an effective identity. Maybe, and let me know in the comments below if you'd like me to make a different video about this. I don't want it to be a video complaining, but I do think that especially the ludo-narrative dissonance, so that would be, this is a really cool model with a great story. Galmaraz is a good example. I feel like Galmaraz should do like a Boomthirster-style explosion. That makes sense, right? I would love to see that, and I think that there's a little bit lacking on a load of the models. But, you know, this is a decked-out field. You know, if half the models do something fun, then I guess half the models do something fun. Maybe it's just a bit of a shame if you own the other half of the models. And do let me know if you don't agree or you disagree with some of my choices in here. Obviously, this is just my opinion from my perspective over the course of the game, course of the review. And as someone who actively is excited about playing current Stormcast, which I am, or at least playing the versions of Stormcast that I like, so like Neave and Ynastra and that sort of build, then I think that actually, like, there is a lot of fun in this book. There's a lot of stuff that's not fun, and if you've bought it recently, that's going to suck. But there's a lot of stuff that's fun, and that's cool. And hopefully you enjoyed the video. And if you enjoyed the video, please do like and subscribe, leave a comment, share it with your friends, and join my Patreon. That helps support me because this has taken nearly 5 hours to record. So I hope you've enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. See you soon. Goodbye. Bye.